right, so ready to dive deep into psychoanalysis.
Let's get into it.
We're talking Freud, Adler, Jung, big names, those pioneers who really mapped out the human mind.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to understand what makes us tick.
Yeah, and ever feel like there's so much going on beneath the surface? Like, way more than we realize that's actually influencing all our choices in life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the time. Like how we interact with people, how we approach relationships, our careers, everything.
Exactly. It's all connected. And that's where we're going to be looking at Master Psych 101 today. I'm so excited to unpack some of these key ideas and see if these theories can shed some light on those hidden dynamics.
Yeah, I think it'll be really helpful for a lot of people because what's fascinating about these theories is that they're still so relevant today, even though they were developed like over a century ago.
Crazy, right?
It is. It's like they provide this framework for understanding the why behind our actions, those really deep-seated motivations that, like you said, we're not even fully aware of.
Right, and the book actually talks about how psychoanalysis emerged during a time of some really major societal shifts in the late 1800s and early 1900s. You know, it's like the world was primed and ready to start exploring the inner workings of the mind.
Oh, totally. You've had all these new scientific advancements happening, changing social norms. Like, it's no coincidence that exploring the inner world became like a major focus at that time. It makes so much sense when you put it in that context.
Yeah, totally. So let's dive into some foundational concepts then. So Master Psych 101 kicks off with this idea of the id, the ego, and the superego.
Okay.
And it's kind of like this. Think of the id as this impulsive, instinctual part of us, the part that wants instant gratification, like right now. It's operating purely on what are called the pleasure principle, just seeking immediate satisfaction.
Right, like just do it. Whatever feels good, just go for it. And then you have the superego,
Yeah.
which is kind of like the opposite, right?
Yeah.
It's that internalized moral compass. It's that voice of conscience that's always reminding us of all the shoulds and should nots that we've learned from society and our upbringing and everything.
The angel on your shoulder.
Exactly.
And then right smack dab in the middle of this, you've got the ego.
Yeah.
Per ego. It's like the mediator stuck between these two really powerful forces, right? It's trying to balance those opposing forces, the id and the superego.
Right.
The ego's operating on what they call the reality principle. So it's trying to find ways to satisfy the id, those desires, but in a socially acceptable way. Like, how can we make this work in the real world?
Right, so it's like this constant internal negotiation happening. You know, Freud was really groundbreaking because he recognized this interplay within us, you know, the psyche, and how that shapes so much of our behavior.
It makes sense, though, right?
It does.
When you think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you're faced with a really tempting dessert, but you're also trying to be healthy and eat healthy.
The classic straw.
So your id is screaming at you, eat the cake, it looks so good.
Oh yeah, eat the whole thing.
And then the superego is there warning you, think of your health goals. You've been working so hard, don't blow it all now.
Think of your waistline.
Exactly, and then poor ego is trying to find a compromise.
Right.
Like maybe it's suggesting, okay, let's just have a smaller portion, or let's find a healthier alternative.
Exactly. It's that constant internal battle, you know, between what we want, our values, and just like the constraints of reality,
Yeah.
you know? And sometimes these conflicts, that's where those defense mechanisms really come into play.
Yes, okay, defense mechanism.
Yeah.
So the book describes these as unconscious strategies we use to protect ourselves from anxiety, from things we don't want to think about or deal with. Right?
Yeah, those uncomfortable truths about ourselves or about our lives.
Since like denial, repression, sublimation, it's like our mind's way of shielding us from, like I said, the stuff we just don't want to deal with.
Yeah, it's like a protection mechanism. So denial, I mean, that's a pretty straightforward one. It's basically refusing to accept reality.
Right.
So like imagine someone who's in deep debt, but they continue to spend money recklessly, and they're just completely ignoring all the mounting bills.
Oh, yeah.
That's denial in action.
Classic example. Okay, so what about repression then?
All right, so repression, that's more about burying those unwanted thoughts or memories deep down, like so deep you don't even have to deal with them consciously.
Right, you just shove them down.
Exactly, but here's the thing. Those repressed feelings,
Yeah.
they don't just go away, and as the book points out, they can still influence our behavior in like subtle ways.
They manifest in other ways, right?
Exactly.
It's not like they just disappear.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pressure cooker, right? All those suppressed emotions, they can build up and then eventually explode, often in like unhealthy ways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then what about sublimation? That one seems like a more positive defense mechanism.
Right. This one's kind of interesting. Yeah.
It's more about channeling those potentially destructive impulses into something that's actually productive or even creative. So think of an artist who channels their pain into a powerful masterpiece, or someone who's really angry and they use that anger to fuel their athletic performance or something. It's taking those negative emotions and transforming them into something positive.
Okay, so it's not about just straight up denying or suppressing those feelings completely, but it's about finding a healthy outlet, like a way to work through them.
Exactly, to express them, to channel them in a way that's beneficial.
Yeah, that's actually pretty empowering. I like that.
It is. It speaks to the incredible adaptability of the human psyche, you know? Like we can take these negative things and turn them into something positive.
Love that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, now moving on from Freud, Master Psych 101 also delves into Adler's individual psychology, which is a little bit different.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about Adler. So Adler shifted the focus a little bit away from the unconscious. He wanted to look more at the conscious mind and emphasizing things like our goals, our values, and the social influences that shape us.
Okay, and the book highlights this idea of striving for superiority as like a key concept in Adlerian psychology, right?
Yeah, it is, but it's not about like being better than everyone else though, right?
Not like a cutthroat kind of way.
No, it's more nuanced than that. Adler believed that we all have this innate drive to improve ourselves, to overcome those feelings of inferiority and achieve our full potential. Like that's a natural human instinct.
Okay.
And that drive actually stems from our early experiences of helplessness as infants. Like we start out so helpless, right? So we're constantly trying to overcome that. And that kind of motivates us to strive for competence and mastery throughout our whole lives.
It makes sense, right? We're always pushing ourselves to grow and achieve and become more.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't have to be at the expense of others. It's not about putting other people down. It's about lifting ourselves up.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. So then what about this concept of lifestyle that Adler talks about?
So lifestyle, that's basically our own unique way of navigating the world. It's like all of our values, our beliefs, our perceptions, how we see things, and our behavioral patterns. Everything all wrapped up together.
Okay.
So it's like a blueprint that we develop early in life based on our experiences and all our interactions with the world.
Interesting.
And Adler believed that understanding our own personal lifestyle is super crucial for personal growth because it helps us understand those deeply ingrained patterns that we might have that are actually holding us back without us even realizing it.
Okay, that's a good point. And the book actually gives a great example. It talks about two siblings, right?
Oh, yeah.
They grow up in the same household.
Right. Exact same environment.
But one sibling develops a lifestyle
Yeah.
of always striving for achievement. Like they're really driven, they want to accomplish things. And the other sibling adopts a more passive approach. You're more dependent. It really highlights how even in the same environment, our interpretations, how we respond to things, can shape completely different paths for us.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what Adler would say. Those differing lifestyles, they come from their unique perceptions and interpretations of the shared experiences. Even though they had the same parents, the same house, they're taking away different things, different meanings from those experiences.
So it's not just our external circumstances, but our internal world.
Yeah.
Like our beliefs, our attitudes. They're shaping our reality, our lifestyle.
You got it. It's about how we process and internalize those experiences. Yeah, and it's like that blueprint shapes how we approach relationships, how we see ourselves in the world. It's really powerful stuff.
It is. And then Adler, he also brings up this whole concept of social interest, right?
Yeah, that was a big one for him.
And so he believed that having a strong sense of social interest, like a feeling of belonging, contributing to something larger than yourself, that's super important for psychological well-being.
Yeah, like we're not just isolated individuals, you know? We're part of something bigger. And that sense of connection is really important for our mental health.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that interconnectedness, like the importance of community and how we relate to each other.
Exactly, exactly. And Adler, he actually saw like isolation and self-absorption as major contributors to mental distress. He thought that finding meaning, like real purpose in life, comes from contributing to the well-being of others.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like that saying, we rise by lifting others.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, now shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about Carl Jung.
Okay, yeah, Jung, I'm intrigued.
Jung, he's like, we're entering a whole new dimension of psychoanalysis here. He took those unconscious processes, but he added in this whole concept of the collective unconscious. It's a pretty wild idea.
Okay, the collective unconscious. Master Psych 101 describes it as this wellspring of universal symbols and patterns, the archetypes.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like a shared reservoir of human experience, like we're all tapping into it. Yeah, it's like this deep well of like ancient wisdom and patterns that have been passed down through generations.
Okay, so what about archetypes then? What are those exactly?
Okay, archetypes. Those are those recurring figures, the motifs that pop up in cultures all over the world and all throughout history. Like, think about the hero, the mother, the wise old man, the trickster. These figures show up everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
And Jung, he believed these archetypes aren't just personal constructs. He thought they're actually inherited from the collective experiences of humanity, like they're part of our DNA almost.
So it's like these archetypal patterns are kind of wired into us.
Yeah.
And they're influencing our perceptions, our behaviors, but like on a subconscious level, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like we're drawn to certain stories, certain types of people, certain behaviors because they resonate with these deep archetypes within us. It's like we recognize something familiar there.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the book uses the example of the hero's journey, which we see this narrative structure in so many myths and stories across different cultures.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's everywhere.
It's like we're all drawn to these stories about overcoming obstacles, achieving great things, because it resonates with that archetype within us.
Yeah, totally. Like we all have that potential for heroism within us. And when we see it reflected in stories, it just lights up something in our psyche.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And I think about how often we actually see those archetypal patterns playing out in our own lives. The challenges we face, the mentors we meet along the way, those inner battles we all fight, like it's all connected to those archetypes.
Yeah, it's like we're all living out these ancient stories in our own unique ways. And recognizing those patterns can give us, I think, a much deeper understanding of our own experiences and also just the universal struggles that we all share.
It's like we're all connected, right? We're not just individuals operating in isolation, but we're all part of this like much larger collective human story that's been unfolding for centuries.
Yeah. Exactly. We're all in this together. Now, Jung also explored this concept of the shadow, which is really fascinating. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we kind of repress, like the negative qualities that we don't want to acknowledge, like we try to hide them from the world and even from ourselves.
Dark side.
Yeah, basically. And he believed that integrating the shadow, not ignoring it, but really like owning it, is essential for becoming a whole person.
So it's not about becoming like some perfectly good person,
Yeah.
but accepting those darker impulses, the flaws,
Yeah.
as part of who we are. Like it's okay to not be perfect.
Exactly. Jung thought that trying to suppress the shadow just makes it stronger. It's like it festers in the darkness and it comes out in unhealthy ways. But when we bring those hidden aspects into the light, when we become aware of them, then we can understand them and actually manage them better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like, if you're constantly trying to be the nice guy all the time, those suppressed feelings of anger or resentment might come out in other ways, like being passive aggressive or something.
Right.
So it's better to just acknowledge those feelings and deal with them directly in a healthy way.
That's a good analogy. So Jung also talked about individuation, right?
Yes, individuation. It's that process of becoming a unique whole self. It's a journey and it's a lifelong process of integrating all the different aspects of our personality. So the conscious, the unconscious, the light, the shadow. It's about bringing all those pieces together to become the most complete and authentic version of ourselves.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It is, but it's the good kind of work, It's the work of becoming who we're truly meant to be.
And I'm guessing this goes way beyond just fitting into societal expectations, right? It's about uncovering our true potential and living a life that's actually aligned with our values and what we truly aspire to.
Exactly, you got it. Individuation, for Jung, was about embracing our uniqueness and becoming a fully realized individual. Not a carbon copy of someone else, not a product of what society tells us we should be, but truly our own person.
Welcome back. So we've been exploring this fascinating world of psychoanalysis, right? With Freud, Adler, and Jung, really trying to understand those hidden dynamics that shape how we think, how we behave, and how we approach our relationship. But the real question is, how do we actually apply all of these insights in our everyday lives? Like, how do we actually use these theories to make better choices, handle all those challenges that come up, and live a more fulfilling life?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? It's all well and good to understand the theories, but how do we make them work for us in the real world? And Master Psych 101 actually does a great job of dedicating a significant chunk to talking about practical application. It really highlights how understanding these concepts can give us the power to make positive changes.
Yeah, I like that. So let's start with Freud. His ideas about the id, the ego, superego, all the defense mechanisms. How do we actually use those in our lives? Like, how do we actually apply that stuff?
So if you think back to those defense mechanisms we were talking about, just recognizing when we're using them, right? Like, are we in denial about something? Are we repressing our emotion? Are we projecting our issues onto other people? That's a huge first step in actually dealing with them constructively. Instead of just letting those unconscious processes run the show, we can become more aware and make conscious choices about how we respond.
Okay, that makes sense. So, like, if I'm procrastinating on a project at work, for example, instead of just beating myself up for being lazy, maybe I need to take a step back and ask myself, okay, what am I actually avoiding here? Is there some underlying anxiety or fear that I'm not addressing?
Exact. And that self-awareness can be so powerful. It's not about blaming ourselves for those feelings, but it's about understanding where they're coming from. And then we can figure out healthier ways to cope.
Right, get to the root of it.
Yeah. And the book gives a good example of a woman who keeps attracting emotionally unavailable partners. And it's this pattern in her life. She's like, why does this keep happening? Through therapy, she realizes she's actually unconsciously recreating a pattern from her childhood where her father was emotionally distant. And so by becoming aware of this pattern, she can start to break free from it and make different choices.
Wow, so she can actually stop attracting those same types of people.
Yeah, because she understands where it's coming from, so she can actually change the pattern.
Okay, that's a great example. So what about Adler's ideas then? How do those apply to everyday life?
Well, that concept of lifestyle that we talked about, I think that's particularly helpful. Once we understand those patterns that are so ingrained in us, the way we think, the way we behave, the core beliefs we have about ourselves and the world, then we can start to challenge them and make conscious changes.
So it's about recognizing those patterns and then being like, okay, do I want to keep doing this?
Yeah, is this working for me? Or is this something I need to shift? And remember what Adler said about the importance of social context, like how we perceive ourselves in relation to other people. Our sense of belonging and contribution, all that plays a huge role in our well-being.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if I'm constantly comparing myself to other people and feeling inadequate, maybe it's time to really examine where that belief is coming from, right?
Yeah.
Is it serving me? Is it based on reality? Or is it just some old insecurity that I'm carrying around that I need to let go of?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. It's about questioning those beliefs and asking, are they helping me or are they holding me back? And if it's not helping you, you can start to challenge that belief and replace it with something that actually empowers you. It's about reframing our perceptions and focusing on our strengths and contributions.
I like that.
Yeah. Master Psych 101 also talks about some Adlerian therapy techniques like stepping stone analysis.
Oh yeah, with that.
Where you break down these big, overwhelming goals that you might have, right? Into smaller, more manageable steps. It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah, little by little.
Right. Instead of getting completely paralyzed and overwhelmed by the enormity of our dreams, we can focus on the actions we can take today. It's about building momentum one step at a time.
So true. Okay, let's talk about Jung. We can't forget Jung. His ideas about the collective unconscious, archetypes, the shadow, individuation, they all seem so grand, almost mystical in a way. How do we actually ground those concepts in daily life?
Well, Jung would say it all starts with self-awareness, paying attention to our dreams, exploring those recurring patterns and symbols that we see in our lives. All that can offer us clues about our unconscious motivations and desire. It's like our dreams are trying to tell us something,
Yeah, they're like messages from our deeper self.
Exactly. And remember what we talked about with the shadow. Jung emphasized the importance of actually facing that shadow side of ourselves, those parts we try to hide. Instead of striving for some impossible ideal of perfection, he says we need to acknowledge those less desirable qualities and integrate them into our self-concept. That's how we achieve greater wholeness and authenticity. It's about accepting all parts of ourselves, the light and the shadow.
It's about recognizing those imperfections are part of what makes us human. Right?
Exactly. It's about self-acceptance, self-compassion. That's essential for growth.
This has been amazing. I feel like this deep dive into psychoanalysis has been so illuminating. It's incredible how these theories, even though they were developed so long ago, they still offer us such practical tools for personal growth, for greater self-awareness, and for creating more fulfilling relationships in our lives.
It's timeless wisdom. And dear listener, remember, this is just a starting point. Master Psych 101 provides a really solid foundation, but the real journey begins when you start applying these insights to your own unique experiences. Pay attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your behavior. Look for those recurring patterns. And don't be afraid to challenge your limiting beliefs. And never stop striving for growth and self-awareness. It's a lifelong journey.
So true. And for listeners who want to dive even deeper, you can check out the book Master Psych 101, Unlocking the Power of Freud, Adler, and Jung, which is available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. Until next time, keep exploring that fascinating world within, and remember, the journey of self-discovery is a lifelong adventure.